Hey, everybody, this is Laura Eisenhower. It tends to go live before it actually says it's going live, so more than likely we're live. And I'm here with my dear friend, 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who has had quite the journey. And we just have so many topics that we're both so passionate about that we could talk about for such a long time. And one of the great things that we both have in common with each other is we've gotten over and moved through a lot of adversity. Very, very different type of storylines. Some sort of the same, but a lot very different. So between the two of us, we cover a lot of bases. And first off, it's so great to see you. We haven't been in contact for a bit on a sort of video way, if you know what I mean. And it's really great to be back with you, because I know we're going to do this on more of a regular basis. But anything about Seth and me, as far as our bios and our links, you can find in the description. So we're not going to go there. We're just going to jump right into the subject. And it's about the dark night of the ego confronting the soul, which definitely brings in for me the whole process of integration of polarity. And I just want to start with you and what the title means to you. And then I definitely have a lot to say as well.
All right, perfect. I love it. It's such a great topic because really, essentially, what you and I share, even though we have different storylines, like you said, it's that ability to bounce back, to be resilient in the face. Like, sure, we'll get knocked off our feet, we'll get beat up, we'll get knocked down, but you and I both always seem to get up no matter what. And there's a reason for it. It's because what is it that gets knocked down? It's usually the socially engineered or conditioned ego that is confronting the greater expansive nature of the soul, right? That's usually what it is. It's like, we're like, oh my God, it's easy to be this person who feels like they've lived this life, and you keep your focus really limited. But when you start to feel the energy of what is causing your heart to beat, that's causing these incomprehensible miracles, you could say, just pulsing through our entire being. But when you start to become conscious of it, it's like, holy crap, it is so much information that it's like, it can be overwhelming. But what else are we here for, right? To break that ego by expanding it into the soul. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, the ego thing's a funny one, and it definitely cannot work separate from the soul or our spiritual greater nature. And we're here to learn how to make sure that all these aspects of ourselves, are integrated. There's a lot of projection that, ego's a negative thing. There's negative aspects to ego when it hasn't found the balance point where it can connect into these other places. And this is what social engineering really attempts to do, which is polarize us. We see the divide and conquer agendas and this and that, but the polarization of what does it mean to be a failure? What does it mean to be a success? What does it mean to, I don't know, be in a transformative cycle or be locked into the fear of death? So in these times that we're in, people are confronting especially the fear of death. And the fear of death sometimes is like hanging on to the programming for dear life, not wanting to let that programming go, wanting somebody to tell you what to do with the next level of the program, to the point where we miss out on the initiation. So this is what I feel like is going on a collective level, is that breakdown of ego is an incredible opportunity. And we don't want to miss out on this greater initiation that's helping us to really integrate the two. Because I noticed, at least in my life, I would go back and forth between the two. I'd either be really out of my body, more in the multidimensional, like so not relating to anything on the planet, really, or humanity wise, not nature wise. And then other times, if I tapped into how I was feeling on a personality level, I'm just like, I could see the programming. But then I would take things personally, or certain traumas would get the best of me. And sometimes I'd just be like, until I launched into my mission and I allowed my ego to confront the soul, which said to me, this is the most important thing you could listen to, because we are the science. People are saying trusting the science, but we are the science. Understanding the science of the human vessel and how it relates to consciousness and the multidimensional and our own creative imagination, to me, is like where the breakthroughs are right now. What are your thoughts? Because you're like such a wizard when it comes to these kind of topics, and how you process through stuff and how you're able to maintain a very authentic positivity without it being kind of fake. You know what I mean?
Well, so the thing that is, like, the ego gets such a bad rap because it's more like this should be titled Dark Night of the Conditioned Ego, right? But the ego, a healthy ego, never got a chance to develop because we unknowingly have allowed our attention to be diverted to all of these external things, and we've given them more importance than these internal things. What are these internal things? This miraculous, incomprehensible miracle that is pulsing through our being. It's causing our heart to beat. It's causing all kinds of things to happen in our body faster than the speed of light. You know, it's crazy. We are living miracles, but our human identity doesn't get a chance to develop in harmony with that. And that's where it's like coming to like, okay, that doesn't work anymore. We are getting an opportunity to choose to align who we are, who we believe ourselves to be, who we think we are, with this miracle that is allowing us to exist. And then a healthy ego has the ability to develop. And if we, meaning you and me and everybody watching this, if we're competing with each other, if we're like, oh, you know, doing all these things, is that really who we are? Because when I feel this miracle pulsing through me, I want to see that in you. I want to encourage that in everybody, because suddenly it's this thing of like, oh my God, we're so much stronger together. And then it's almost like having the playfulness and awe and wonder of a little kid, but with the maturity of an adult, is like what this new ego has the potential to be like. And that's
Yeah. Well, and what's amazing is it's the solar plexus, which distributes energy and light and power throughout our whole system. So if we have an unhealthy ego and sort of a self-hatred or a negating relationship with ourself, I mean, it affects the organs. Vital life force energy can't reach all the aspects of self that it needs to reach in our brain, in our nervous system, in our endocrine system, and everywhere. So we know the frequency of love is what nurtures children, pretty much keeps them alive and able to thrive. But I mean, when we're older and we don't have maybe that source anymore, that on a biological level, or we didn't have a good relationship with it, or maybe it wasn't there at all, we need to understand the greater mother, father, the divine blueprint within ourselves, and how important it is, you know, to connect with that, so that our ego identity can be connected with nature, because nature is going to connect us with soul, you know, earth, air, fire, water, ether, the elemental aspects of everything related to consciousness, and how that connects with the physical plane, which astrology shows us, medical astrology especially. I posted something earlier about how it's been targeted as a pseudoscience, but so we can learn these things, whether we do or not. I mean, you know, it's up to the individual to decide. That solar plexus, having a healthy identification with self, where it's not about competition or the awards you've won or the degrees that you have, or the things that maybe give a person a sense of false light. It goes a lot deeper. Not to say that those things don't matter, but if our worth is based on something that can be ripped away, or something we might discover as a lie, or that didn't give us the full picture, then all of a sudden we don't have an ego anymore, and we're in an ego crisis. So if we can allow the ego to expand into the multidimensional, unconditional love of source energy, and really understand the pain and the adversities and the difficulties that are going on, so that we can generate a breakthrough and a creative intent that can begin to utilize this power center to distribute throughout our bodies and our creative channels what we'd really like to see take place. And then the ego all of a sudden is connected with divine power, and we're able to co-create our reality and not be victimized by it as badly. And I think that's so key, because it's such a powerful and creative part of who we are. The energy of Mars, that's ego identity, but it's also the warrior energy. It's also our willpower. And if we can have the willpower to devote to something much greater and find connection with it and self-worth with it, there's no limits to what we're able to manifest and create. When we're limited to the personality matrix and it's all based in the programs, though, I think that's the root of disease, more than these things floating around that we should fear and mask ourselves from. I feel like the true root of disease is not having that healthy energetic circulation.
We are, and that's the thing, everything you're talking about, like, we are more, the whole illusion is that we are disconnected from that stuff. And the reality is that we are absolutely fully connected to it. In fact, we're more connected to what we could call divine source, or whatever you want to call it. We are more that than we are not that. but we're living in this temporary thing where most people seemingly have got it backwards. And because so many people have got it like, oh, I'm me, this is who I am, oh, my woe is me, they keep projecting that energy forward and they keep missing what is happening right inside of them. And that's like the cosmic joke, you know? But you know, it goes back to what you said about the science of it, right? Because science now, it's such a big word, right? It's become its own buzzword. But in the last few hundred years, through the Industrial Revolution, science has become like a religion, essentially. But there's open-minded scientists, those who common sense and logically agree, well, we don't know what we don't know, right? But if we can't prove something, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we can't prove it. And that's why consciousness, for the most part, has been left out of a lot of scientific experiments. But it's like you're saying, these bodies are the most finely tuned scientific instruments there are to detect all these different subtle layers of energy that we truly are. And that's where it gets exciting, because then we're like, okay, wow, you mean we're not limited by anything except for ourselves? You know, when I realized like, wow, I'm my only limitation, I'm like, well, I'm going to do something. I'm going to keep coming up against the edge of that limitation until it breaks through. Right. And most people are like, no, I'm afraid I'm going to die. It's like, well, we're already dead. Right. Or look at it like this way. When we die, we come face to face with this anyway. So why not start to become conscious of it now and experience this like playfulness and wait, it went.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Pluto's the planet of death, but it's also the planet of transformation, rebirth, alchemy. And yeah, fearing death is to fear transformation. I mean, we're inevitably going to die and we're being controlled by this fear of something, or the fear that we're harming somebody else. And that's a really manipulative way to, disempower people, because it's playing on other individuals' good intention. Understanding frequency is really important, and digging real deep and following whatever red flags need to be followed is important, because ultimately we're in an ascension window period, and it's a time of human advancement. It's a time for us to grow and to thrive and to face these fears and get to the other side. Because how are we going to move the seals and fences out of our DNA and move on to these higher strands and upgrade ourselves to the fullness and wholeness of all that we could be, 12-strand DNA and beyond, if we're afraid of moving through these initiations and through these layers? And there's always going to be some kind of death. It might be the death of a job or a relationship, a death of a belief system or a way of life or a habit, or an emotional attachment. But on the other side, because Pluto clears and cleanses and holds space for the new to come in, as we step into this, we clear the vessel to be able to hold the multidimensional and to be able to hold the spiritual dimensions. And then our physical starts to morph from carbon-based to crystalline. Our chakra system begins to change. And we're participating and in alignment with organic ascension, because this is happening on a planetary grid work level and on a Stargate level. And our DNA, our nervous system, and our chakras are connected to all this, including the multidimensional cosmos. So there's a lot of compartmentalism. And all that can change when we're willing to not limit ourselves to a certain aspect or a polarized.
Hold it, like when you hold it, right? When you hold it, it's more like, instead of trying to hold space or hold these frequencies, let's allow ourselves to be held by them. It's kind of what it's more like, right? Because it's already there. And when we get beyond that limitation of who we think we are, based upon the things that have happened to us in the past, that crystalline reality just becomes a known reality, because it's already happening.
It's already here
in us. It's like,
it's a big reveal. It's really a big reveal. And every adversity is an opportunity to let go of something that doesn't serve us. So if we let it control us and it doesn't serve us, then we're stunted. Our growth is stunted. And it's like the cocoon that we're wanting to emerge out of now has more of a prison cage around it, because our minds are the ones, that become imprisoned. If it was enough to just use weaponry, they wouldn't bother with the mind control and the social engineering. So that creates the ultimate infection in our creative channels that these death cycles help to release us from. And the power of transformation is that we become the fullness of all that we are. And like you said, it's wired into us. There's been manipulations to keep us from it, but ultimately it's a self-discovery that we find inwardly. It's not something we adopted from outside of ourselves. There might be dots to connect and things that help us to understand ourselves that are outside of us, but we know that externalizing these kind of things really doesn't get us anywhere. And we can't be afraid to have that dark night of the ego to confront the soul. Many people talk about the dark night of the soul, but very often the dark night of the soul is just trying to find a sense of identity in the world anyway, that the two can't escape the other.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And everything you're saying, like, is essentially like, here's where attitude equals altitude, you know? And that can simply be understood by like, okay, yeah, like nobody likes to suffer. Nobody likes to go through painful things, but they happen. And so our attitude towards them when they're happening really is revealing as to, are we going to grow and then start to embody the potential that's there? Or are we going to contract and go hide out? And that simply is this, like, you know, I can be like, oh no, I don't want to face this. It's a nightmare. It's happening. And when I do that, I contract. My body chemistry feels awful. Anybody can try this, right? If you're angry and negative and pissed off and blaming, and your body chemistry is going to reflect your attitude. But if you're like, all right, I'm just going to calm down. Those are conditioned reactions that I've played out so many times that I've become addicted. My body's addicted to them. I'm just going to stop that. I'm going to just let that stuff go. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to start loving my own life. That changes your body chemistry. I mean, immediately, instantly does. And if you can get really good at being like, you know what, this sucks, but I'm going to choose to love it because on the other side of it is something greater. If we can make that attitude adjustment on the fly when things are happening, our body chemistry will reflect to us immediately the reward of our efforts of doing that, you know?
And you know what I love about talking to you is there's real experiences behind what we're saying. And it's not just for some, it's available to all. And I like to say the chosen one is love and wisdom. It's not a race. It's not a particular group. It's something that we decide and choose within ourselves, which to me, when we choose love and wisdom, something happens with our creative energy, our physiology, our capacity to, you know, rapidly heal, like you said. Just a real quick story, and then I'd love to hear sort of an example in your life. When I was living on the road and I was really, really broken. I know I've shared this story before for anybody who's listened to me a lot, but, and this was kind of a long-term situation that I was really kind of down and out, and in a very, very vulnerable position. Every time I allowed myself to own that feeling, it was like such a low frequency. And I could just tell that predatory energies, I would stand out to, and I just felt like I was really in a power struggle with just these lower forces. And then it was just a simple change of mind, a little bit of laughter, a shift in perception. And I just felt like I was everywhere I needed to be, and I'm whole. I don't have to over-identify with this. This is just awesome. What are the resources that are available in the here and now that I can tap into versus, you know, allowing myself to be stuck in this loop to the point where I'm creating a reality that is beginning to suck me into the point it's going to be really hard to get back out of if I'm not careful. And once I changed my perspective, and I learned a lot of this in the wilderness, just seeing the way energy changes and your environment changes immediately. Anyway, when I changed my perspective, I was literally pulling money out of the ground. I would attract really, really high vibe people. Things began to fall into place. And it was like, I could feel that synchronistic connection with the magic and flow of the universe versus allowing my solar plexus and my ego identity to over-identify with, oh, I'm screwed. I'm broke. You know, my parents are like really worried about me and they think I'm like, what's going to happen? And they could only help me so much. But I know you know, being in prison for 2 years, you got over all sorts of really heavy addictions. Do you have like any sort of, you know, kind of story that sort of sticks out to you of just that drastic change you saw when you shifted your perception?
Oh my God. Well, and now like what I went through is more relevant to what most people are going through than ever before, you know? So I got a 5-year sentence and I did 3 years of it. And when I got there, it was dark night of the ego, like times infinity for me. You know, I was just like, you know, I grew up in the woods. So for me to go living in the woods and being thrown into a penitentiary and like, you know, I was not adjusting well at all. But it put me to a place where I was like, you know what? I have no option but to fully be present with this, to fully face it, to be there. And I'm like, what if all of this is greater than it appears to be? Because it looks awful all around me. I'm surrounded by awful people. You know, it's all this just hardcore. And I just let myself be held by this energy that we're talking about, that we all are. And then all of a sudden it was like, I wasn't even in there. And I started feeling so good that I was like, wow, I'd much rather feel like this. People would be talking and yelling and going off. And I had no idea they were even doing anything, because I just felt like, oh my God, there's this magic, miracle, awe-inspiring thing. Like a little kid, you're just like, oh, like we're daydreaming, right? We're always told not to daydream as kids, but I just allowed my daydream to become like a full-on soul dream, which isn't a dream at all. It's reality. It's fully awake, you know? And so now, okay, you know, I'm practicing this in there, and I'm around all of these predatory people, and they're just like, you know, they're like feeling it too. And they're like, oh my God. And that's when I knew, I was like, oh my God, because I feel like this, and I just don't care what anybody thinks or says or does, because I'm cultivating such a state of being inside of myself that is affecting others around. I'm like, why would I do anything but that? You know, and then seeing how others would feel that, and they're like, wow, I want to do that too. It just makes sense. And now fast forward, look at the whole world. Like everybody's feeling like, look, like if we fight fire with fire, we're just going to create more fire. Deep down, none of it, we all have different roles to play, right? But deep down, we all have an unprecedented opportunity to face the dark night of the ego by just surrendering to it. Let your worst fears come up. Let your whole life fall. Let it go. Like you're already, like you're dead, you know, like, but the more you can trust that, the more you can trust that it's okay, you start to know that it's going to be okay. And as soon as you begin to experience, your body chemistry will tell you what it feels like to know that you are greater than whatever your struggle is. Oh my God, when you feel that, you start to remember how to turn it on at will. And that's, you know,
Oh, totally.
where we get good at it.
Oh, absolutely. And when we look at like the symptoms, one can project onto the symptoms, oh, that must be this, whether you look on the internet or your doctor tells you, and all of a sudden your physiology is being controlled by, here's the more than likely outcome, here's the label and diagnosis. You know, so one carries around this new identity of having this illness or disease, or whether it's autoimmune, whether it's even a cancer. And I'm not saying, you know, I've got the answers or the cures, but I remember really feeling like I had some of this stuff in my body. And I remember saying to myself, this is a healing. This is a transformation. It's not going to feel comfortable, but if you can ride this in a way that like serves you, helps you to get to know yourself better instead of disconnect even more by handing it over to somebody else. I'm not saying that doctors and healers don't have their place, but I remember taking it upon myself to really self-heal. And I've had to, you know, have help before. I couldn't do it all by myself, but I really did realize that in the face of feeling a certain symptom, I have one or two ways of perceiving it. I either get closer to myself, I either transform it, I either just lay my hands on it and listen to it because it's trying to get my attention. So why would I ignore it and trying to like put a Band-Aid on it or take some pharmaceutical? It's here for a reason. It's showing up. It has something really important to tell me, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. We are required to like do maintenance. And if we negate something or neglect something in the spiritual and emotional and mental, the body's the final carrier of those blocked and stuck energies, to the point where the body's like, hey, you didn't get a chance to take that day off you needed, or that weekend away so that you could process through this. And now the body's like, you got to listen to me. But nature only helps us to seek equilibrium and upgrade. It's designed in that way. It's encoded in that way. And that's why the web of life is able to sustain life. And we see things decay and grow and be born again. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing with any of the adversities that we face. Just don't be afraid of it. Give it the unconditional love it deserves. And to me, why my series of speeches or lectures lately have been called Upgrading in the Face of Adversity. You know, how in a moment that might victimize you or take you down into the lowest place of disempowerment, how can you turn that around? So when we look at what people are going through in the world today, do you really have to hang on to that identity of being a doctor in the particular hospital that you're a doctor in, or a teacher in that particular school, or whatever position in society you play at the cost of compromising yourself? Or are you going to take that risk because you have a greater trust in your creative power and the universe, and that when you do what's right and you live in integrity and you seek to follow your intuition, the miracles and the amazing things can happen. So it's really wonderful to see people that are willing to walk away. And I really feel for those that don't feel empowered enough because they're counting on that paycheck. But, you know, folks like you and me who have lost everything and rebuilt it on some level, and this has happened over and over and over again in my life. You know, when I see a person's house burn down, it's like, metaphorically, so many of my houses have burned down. They didn't maybe go up in smoke, but I lost it in a different way, to the point where I had to be really resourceful, and I couldn't just look at myself and identify with the loss. I had to look at the opportunity and the upgrade that it represents, because the universe always wants to take us to the next place that's better than the one before. But if we're in a victim consciousness, if we're giving our power away, or we're in a survival chakra, we miss out on the download or intuitive guidance, you know?
Well, that's what I love about you too, because I've seen so many times, like when things are happening, you have this ability to switch into this, like, you laugh, you have this like comical, and like, you know, you take the chemistry that is hurtful or painful or struggling, and you transmute it into a different attitude. And then your whole chemistry changes and you light up, and you're great at that. And you've actually, it's what, honestly, like I've seen that happen so many times with you that I'm like, wait, I can do that too. And so I've been laughing.
Oh, you do that. You totally do that.
I mean it. I'm totally serious. And see, that's the crazy thing about it, is when you look at the reality of what it is to be a human being, and we, you know, everybody's so focused on all the world events that are happening and these people in the news. But when you look at what these people are, and you realize that inside of them is a pineal gland, a pituitary gland, these glands that are in, I mean, these release the most sacred, supernatural chemicals. I mean, for countless generations, cultures have revered the glandular makeup of the human body as the keys to ascension, or the keys to expanding beyond death. And look at these people are talking about nonsense. Meanwhile, they have a pineal gland, they have a pituitary gland, but they're just talking about, wait, what? So to me, that's comical. You know, I always tell people, like, our best friends, who are our best friends? Our organs, our glands, like, these are our best friends. Why are we not hanging out with them more? Why are we not harmonizing with them? Why are we not being with them and laughing with them? And because when you do, they react to you. You know, when you're like, oh, I love you and I'm happy and I'm playful, and your body chemistry changes to reflect that attitude adjustment.
Absolutely. So well put. And that's the thing with astrology, which is so interesting. And I'd love to just do a little share screen, just real quick. It's not anything I'm going to read. But this is what's really important for people to remember, because when we are working on the physical plane, we have to understand that it's connected to our consciousness, earth, air, fire, water, whatever we have the most affinity to, and how that affects our organs depends on the individual. So say somebody's, you know, got Gemini and Aries. Well, their ego identity is going to have a lot to do with their mental body, and the health of their ego has a lot to do with their thoughts. And of course, across the board, we all have that. But say somebody's moon is in Gemini, their emotional energy is going to be very tied up into their mind. So there's so many, you know, different kind of examples that I could use that. But real quick, you guys can see that. You see all organs and things connected to our endocrine system that are related to certain signs. Well, what's interesting,
you gotta send that to me when you
yeah,
can.
Yeah, definitely. So For example, like the North Node right now in astrology that we're all experiencing is in the sign of Gemini. The North Node has to do with the growth period that we're in as a humanity and what we're here to integrate as a collective. So Gemini has to do with our throat chakra, communication, right? But what organs does it have to do with? Shoulders, arms, hands, upper ribs, lungs, trachea, bronchi, capillaries, breath, oxygenation of blood. And so if we see the symptoms that people are going through, this growth period is being stunted because a lot of the particular organs connected to Gemini are what people are dealing with, you know, clotting or not able to breathe very well, because we're being taught to fear taking deep breaths. And we need our breath because that's where the codes are. That's where we integrate and release also what's within. And if you look at the very bottom is 𝗑𝗨𝗃, the 13th sign, fetal cells, tailbone, cranial sacral axis, solar sacrum, kundalini, amrita, Leyden gland, base of brain, golden chalice, lunar to solar transfiguration. And it's between Sagittarius and Scorpio. So it's got some of the sexual kind of energies and sort of solar plexus kind of, and then Sagittarian type qualities, because this is the purification zone. When we move through this November 17th, it begins. So it's just very interesting when we see that. So if we understand a chart, we can begin to, oh, you guys can see my other stuff here. Hold on. So when we understand our chart, it's interesting to understand the medical part. So I don't want to like say something like, and then people are like, do you do readings anymore? And I really don't, but I do group calls and you're a part of that. And I do answer questions and look at people's charts at Zoom events, but it's a really helpful way to know what you're dealing with and get to know yourself better. And I just wanted to add that little bit in about the medical astrology and the fact that our physical body is connected to the multidimensional, to the stargates on the planet, to the planetary grid network. And when we work out and clear something or heal something within us, we send it out to the collective and we help raise the vibration on the planet. That's really how we do it. It doesn't come from outside. We are the shift.
Oh,
what are your thoughts?
Oh my God, exactly. And you know what, to add to that, like the understanding of astrology, when you look at it as just from a physical perspective, the more you harmonize your sense of self with the natural harmony that's inside of your body, the more you practice it, the better at creating internal coherence that you get. At some point, you start to become conscious of the coherence that exists in the solar system, in the galaxy, and you become aware of how that's supporting you as this person. And it's so beautiful to feel things like that and have that type of stuff be what influences our healthy ego, you could say. You know, we can all do this. We are this.
And we're sharing these codes as well. Like we all come in with this map, but we're not limited to it. It doesn't fully define us because we have the 12 strand and beyond. And when we look at the 12 zodiac signs and the 13th sign now, I mean, we're all giving each other, you know, pieces. So we might come in with sort of a dominant, you know, like a predisposition to maybe more air signs than water signs. But with transits and all these different events going on, we end up experiencing the whole shebang. We might be in a relationship with somebody who has opposite signs. So we experience what we don't maybe have in our chart. We experience it with somebody else and they activate it in us to the point where we help each other become whole. And eventually the chart's not going to matter. We won't need to look at it or refer to it. It's great to have as a tool. But to me, it's a treasure map to bring us into the 0-point unified field, and all these different patternings that are happening give us the challenges that we need, but also the things that flow to help us bring this greater mastery and intelligence into those challenges so that the two can have a conversation, which to me is very much how confronting the ego or the dark night of the ego confronting the soul is creating a larger communication. The lungs need to talk to the heart. The heart needs to talk to the sexual centers so that sexual energy is not disconnected from love. Our brains need to, you know, as it's the computer and hard drive, it has to be in agreement to what the higher self and intuition is saying. So this greater conversation, we can help each other achieve. And that's what I love what you were saying. When you reach these states, you want other people to experience. You're not in that competition. You're in that service to others. It's not about taking somebody down to be on top. And so this is what we need to do. And what to me, the true definition of unity consciousness is, it's not just like us all getting along and hugging each other, is recognizing that we have greater work to do to share qualities that can help us to rebuild the DNA architecture And we can look at somebody and be inspired by them instead of jealous. Like, wow, okay, that might not come naturally to me, but I can still do that. I can pick up, you know, whatever instrument and play it, even if, you know, I'm better at the drums. Or, I mean, we have to push the envelope and challenge ourselves, but not push ourselves to do something we don't resonate with just for the sake of being the best. I mean, the thing is, we have to know that we all have the capacity to really do whatever we want. What are we passionate about is the question. And where can we encourage each other and inspire each other instead of feel less than, feel jealous, or in competition. And to me, that's how we play this greater orchestra of music and tones, which I feel relates to the music of the spheres and the higher octaves of the planetary energies that tune up our glands, our nervous systems, and our organs to be much more of a, it's just more than an organ, like you were saying, you know.
So beautiful, because like when you really look at it, what we know is that all of these organs are bioelectric organs. So every single organ in our body is functioning because of bioelectricity, right? Just like a computer or artificial technology or whatever is working with man-made electricity coming through it, our entire being is functioning through some type of organic bioelectricity. And so when we begin to realize that, and we start taking these parts of ourselves that feel stuck or in limitation, and just simply realize that we are bioelectricity. We're literally, it's pulsing through every bit of our being, it's pulsing around our being. And if we just relax, it's like there's this really beautiful place between being super, super relaxed, almost to the point where the body's gonna fall asleep, but keeping the mind wide awake. Train yourself to do that. You know, the body is about to fall asleep, but the mind is wide awake. You find this in-between spot, this like sweet spot, like this 0 point. And all it is just practicing doing it. And then like my friend, Dr. Northup, our friend, Dr. Northup, community. The word community, immunity is in it. Unity is in it. Like, and that's why, so we recognize as individuals the importance of doing this internal work, right? We do it. We come to know ourselves as soul. We let that influence the ego, so the ego gets to be healthy. And then we come together with others and we try to inspire them to remember that they are doing something similar to that.
Exactly. This is so great talking to you, because, and that's the thing with a lot of the fractures and trauma that can come out of a community when somebody tries to be the guru or leader and is doing dark things in the background because it's misusing the power and trying to manipulate people. And there are plenty of stories, plenty of documentaries about those kind of stories. And they still go on to this day. And of course, the worst, you know, cult on earth, we don't have to give too much of attention to, but we all know, yeah.
All these
Illuminuts. So Illuminati kind of thing. So there's a lot of individuals that are in positions of power and influence that have been a part of those families to create a social engineering that's beyond just the programming on television or in magazines, or, you know, what's coming through our electronics based in the different dark technology mechanisms that they use in order to impact us. I mean, we're being hit from all sides. So when we look at the real healing of community, it really is about appreciating everybody's personal sovereignty, recognizing oneness is diversity and harmony, and that if we're all functioning at our best and we're all supporting one another and being our best, why would we feel nothing but love and mutual respect? When somebody else is trying to run the show and say my way or the highway, and you have to initiate into it, or we all know the creepy culty stuff. So I just had to call that out, because a lot of people are healing from those sort of tragic experiences of being a part of a community. And you guys are creating something that is so beyond that, which is, and I'm trying to do the same here where I am at healing centers. And that's the thing. It's like sometimes, you know, we might bring up, you know, products that we believe in, or subscriptions that you guys can help support. nobody likes to talk about money and everybody's kind of sick of the money system, but I just want you to know that people like Seth and I reinvest that into building things like community and ways to support people in these times.
That's the truth. You know, it's funny because like the whole idea of monetizing self-help, like obviously it's like, why? It's like, and in our hearts, like I think most people would prefer to be vegan, right? But we live in a world where just driving your car down the road, you're going to run over ants. Like there's no practical way to do this stuff. So it's like the way we create change is by embodying it to the best of our abilities and not judging others for their attempts to try to embody it. Because you know what, like, okay, yeah, we're in these, every single system that we're dependent on to varying or different degrees is all crumbling at the same time. Why is that? Because it's not in harmony with the greater laws of the universe. And so, you know, instead of like getting, you know, we can be upset, we can go through that stuff, but then remember, bounce back. Because if you stay upset too long, if you get angry too long, you're just hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And when you realize that these people that have all this power and control and doing all this stuff, even though they have power and control, they don't really have what you and I are talking about. Because if they did, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, because nobody gets a get out of jail free pass. It might seem like it for a little while. People might do all these terrible things and get away with it, but the universe is a perfect accounting system. The laws of karmic repercussion are real. And so this is the beauty of all this. So, you know, at the end of the day, like, we have really what choice? Rise above it. That's what I choose. You know, I've been in situations where people have done terrible. That, you know, if I was to judge it from a victimized standpoint, you know, it's evil what I could say they did. But if I was to say, okay, well, what would that look like if I didn't blame them and I wasn't the victim? What would it look like if I chose to take full responsibility for that? That would mean that I would have to come to terms with a greater part of myself that I wasn't conscious of, that I'm now becoming conscious of, and allowing to integrate into the part of me that created this dark treatment from some external person or force. And you move through it when you allow yourself to face these dark nights of what you resist or of your socially engineered self. And now, like, this is what you and I do together. We have, I mean, even though we haven't done a live for a while, like, we talk about this stuff together. We talk to all kinds of other people about this. There's so many people now that are like, wait a minute, what if all the quote unquote terrible things that are happening are perfect? What if they're supposed to happen because this is the result of us having been unconscious for who knows how long, and now we're becoming conscious, and so we have a little bit of a mess to clean up, but that's okay. We're going to clean it up. And that's what this community, immunity, unity, is what all this stuff's for, you know?
I love it. And see, that's the power of the creative imagination. We look at a universe, the universe, and yes, there's the simulated reality version of it, the artificial component of the moon, the Saturn moon matrix, and yeah, dark technologies, but that's all an overlay of the organic creation. And that's what Archonic AI systems do. They imitate, they replicate, to the point where if we're in a lower frequency because we've fallen into a programming that seeks to divide and conquer or cause us a really bad sort of relationship with ourselves, that we're either narcissistic or overly insecure to the point where we keep missing the mark and keep missing the mark. I mean, it's just really important that we recognize what the creative imagination is capable of tapping into, to then anchor and ground into the physical plane to produce a capacity to clean up the messes and transmute and alchemize the deadliest of weapons and the most fearful of things. Because, you know, I mean, really what it all equates to is, like you're saying, I mean, we're shining a light on the unconscious to recognize a much, much fuller picture, our multidimensional self, our creative imagination. And these are opportunities to be able to reach for our treasures instead of fall apart and go into a really low zone. But if we do go into a low zone, we have to give it love and not judgment, because sometimes we are so afraid of that shadow work and we're so ashamed of not maybe feeling that great at times, that we don't give it the unconditional love it needs to be able to bounce back, like you're saying. Because the only times I bounce back is when I'm willing to just hold space for myself. And if it means I need to cry for a couple of days, you know, we've got the water element. It's a part of nature, you know, but it's the denial and the stagnant energies that are, I feel, more of a concern, that keep us from being able to get back up when we feel like we've been knocked down.
Beautiful, my God. So here, wait, I can't hear you.
So go ahead and talk. I'm just got to shut my camera off for a sec. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, what I was going to say in response to everything you were saying is, it takes energy to make energy. That's really the thing here. It's like, it's easy for us to stay stuck in these old habituated patterns of thought, belief, behaviors, and actions. But that is the socially engineered, conditioned ego. And let's call it what it is. It's an addiction. Human beings are addicted to who they think they are. And we have personally and collectively become so addicted to who we think and believe ourselves to be that we have forgotten how to break that addiction and focus on what we are. And now we get that chance. That's why you and I are friends, and we talk. We're not here to bullshit each other. I want you to be the best version of yourself, and I know you want that for me. And that's why we've stayed friends, and we keep coming back, and we're like, and this is happening with a lot of other people. It's happening with enough of us now where we're like, you know what? Okay, being institutionalized through all these systems that are now crumbling in front of everybody. That's not who we really are. We would much rather focus on what we are, because what we are is some crazy, indescribable being that has bioelectric organs, and we have the possibility to be conscious of that while we're in this body, to the degree that infinity is like, hello, I love you. You haven't been paying attention to me, but hey, I'm trying to get your attention your whole life, and this is where we're at, right?
And it's infinite, so it's not like, I'm not going to go anywhere because I'm infinite. Source energy it's not going anywhere. We can walk away, we can disconnect, we can misalign ourselves, get distracted, but it's always there. Just like our immune system, it just needs attention. It needs a relationship to be cultivated. And the thing is, with those other so-called powers that be, they only have stolen power, the power that they've siphoned, harvested, and taken from us because we bought into a belief system that turned us away from our own intuition and higher awareness and that greater connection with nature, cosmos, and spirit. To the point where there's some systems that demonize that level of self-awareness and knowledge. But we have to understand we're breaking the tree of knowledge, which relates to our DNA and how it's been dumbed down and called junk, or at least a big portion of it. And we're restoring the tree of life template, which is the fullness, and it's moved beyond the duality. And only us can bring ourselves to that breakthrough and victory. And redundantly, I say we win the war within, because ultimately it's a war between ourselves and the things that are using our creative energy and our good intent or our traumas as a weapon against us and a weapon against one another. And all we need to do is say, I'm not going to play that game. There's so much more. And then we break that relationship with that darker aspect of reality in a similar way that we would divorce a narcissist or an abuser. And we seek true love instead, because even if we don't feel the self-esteem, we have enough self-worth and dignity to stand in truth, And that's the hard part with ego. It doesn't mean we have to have a big self-esteem. It means, though, we honor what's sacred and we stand to protect it, even if sometimes it makes us feel uncomfortable and shy. Like I'm not a camera person. It's not always easy to get on camera. But when I sit around and I'm like just trying to process stuff, I'm like, I need to engage in these conversations. But anyway, go ahead, and then I know we'll close because we have a roundtable coming up. But what are your thoughts?
No, that's exactly. I mean, look, my plan was to go off grid and hide out and I didn't want to be around anybody or anything. And the exact opposite happened. I got taken out of that, put into the belly of the beast, you could say. And I realized that the darkest things on the planet need our love. Otherwise, they're just going to keep being dark. I know that's a big pill to swallow, you could say, for a lot of people. But why do we become empowered? Ultimately, so that we can look at some of these dark, horrific things in a place of like, oh, okay, yeah, it's disconnected. That's how it got to be the way it is. So, and a lot of people will, you know, we're ready to be this powerful. And there's enough of us coming together to support one another in our efforts to do that. And this is a time to celebrate, you know?
Totally, totally. And the thing is with the 13th sign and how this ascension window period has enough indications for it to be undeniable that this is a very, very pivotal time in our human history. The 13th sign of 𝗑𝗨𝗃 coming in 2010, big timeline shift happening. It's been prophesized for a long time, and there's way more I could share, you know, Venus transits and all sorts of things that have led to this unbelievable, you know, time in our human history. And it's incredibly activating. And everything that is targeting something that feels disempowering is something that people need to take a major look at. Covering this up when this is a time to be empowered in our throat chakra and speak truth. Not only is this being covered up, there's censorship, right? So that's very much targeting the growth period that we're in as a humanity, which is to get the 5D part of us, the 5th chakra, the elemental ether energy that can purify the mind control so that we can speak truth and amplify it through our voices and our creative self and our ability to telepath. So when one knows that, and then they see, wow, isn't it interesting that all these symbolic things are going on, trying to shut that part of us down? And there's way more to all that. But you know, we have to look at that in the face, and we don't have to just be rebellious and defiant. I mean, a lot of people are very confused and uncomfortable, and it's not about any kind of judgment, but it's about how can we stay aligned with the substance of alchemy that can help one another create this greater transformation that no matter where a person stands, there's no real right or wrong, because we choose love instead of the judgment and the divide and conquer. Because to me, once we overcome the weapons and what they choose to target, we've already turned the weapons into a tool and a medicine for our greater growth. And it no longer holds the charge of harming us because we're allowing it to move us to the next level. And it wants to do the opposite. So that's where we defy it, right? I feel when I look at the sky being sprayed, I'm like, thanks for reminding us of how powerful we are. And that really is not capable of stopping us. Because I used to look at it and just get all pissed off. But does that help? No. We have this creativity that can offset this.
See, this is why we have these conversations. Like, this is exciting, you know, and reminding each other, like, it's okay to be stressed out, but we get stuck in stress, and that's where we got to catch it. And the alchemy that you talked about is literally your body chemistry. You know, try being angry and mad and tell me if you feel how you feel. Chances are you're going to feel like crap, but take a few moments, smile, choose to feel good, and then feel how your entire body chemistry changes. That's alchemy. Like, that's the base. That's how simple it is.
And when you were talking about the sweet spot, I mean, that is really where I feel I meditate, is in the morning before I actually wake up, when I'm between worlds and I'm kind of back asleep. I kind of go back to sleep and I'm awake. And then I realize the veil is lifted away more between the dream realm and the physical realm. And there's really no separation except for the separation we give it, that we can be always lucid dreaming. When we lift the veil between life and death, like you said, we're already dead. Sometimes I'm like, I'm a really real ghost. I'm like a ghost, like, but I'm in a human, but not like a haunted. Well, I could haunt some people. Like, no, I'm just kidding. But it's like we're lifting the veil between life and death, the dream realm, and the waking reality. And when we find that sweet spot that you're talking about, the natural ability for our physical vessel based in the secretions of our glandular system, endocrine system, that's giving off these chemicals that we don't need drugs or anything to do for us, we can reach these exalted bliss states and realize, you know, what takes us away from it. Because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm just crying, or I'm like having an anxiety attack, and I'm like, it's not the time to get up yet. And I might have even had an awesome dream, but it's like reality, you know? So it's like, I do that energy work at those moments right before I go to bed and right as I wake up. That's, to me. So I know we got to go, but what are your thoughts on that, and any closing thoughts?
That's exactly it. You know, you said it every night when you go to sleep, and in the morning when you wake up, we all go past this window of opportunity and we don't even realize it's there. And it's what you said, it's that super relaxed state. But if you remind yourself to be aware, you go through your glands as though they were stargates. And
Our stargates, absolutely.
you can, all it is just remembering to do it, practicing doing it. And then the first time you do it and you remember like what it took to do it, you're like, I'm going to keep doing that. And that's, you know, and again, that's what's the comedy in all this is like, you know, some of the things you hear human beings talking about out there, you're like, really? This is what you think matters? Meanwhile, inside of them are these glands of infinite consciousness that are in them, and they're not even going near it, you know? So it's like, what are you guys doing?
I know, right? And then choosing argument or writing some trolly, nasty thing under somebody's comments because you're just acting out your shadow stuff instead of really looking at yourself and being humble to face that part of yourself. I mean, that's what a life review is. Because we're preparing for death, but we're preparing for death all the time while we're alive. And the two need to work together because it's cyclical. And once we create a strong enough relationship with both sides of it, the atoms start to spin faster, the activation starts to happen quicker, and we forge our way through that dark night of the soul, and we bushwhack a trail for ourselves so that the next time it's not so difficult. So usually the first time is just like, oh man, like this is brutal. Am I going to survive this? Am I going to get through it? And that's like we were talking about, laughter and lifting that veil a bit to where it's like, the reason it's called Dark Night of the Soul is because something's not going to come in here and solve it for you. It's about that inner light, finding that inner light. And that's why the crone and the underworld are so connected with each other, that the lantern of wisdom becomes illuminated when you're in the dark and you can find that light within, instead of waiting for a savior or everything to be perfect. It's a way to cultivate a greater level of intelligence that the dark can gift us with, if we,
Exactly.
which your journey
I'll just say this in closing. I always tell people, I don't tell anybody, and do whatever you want. We've all got the ability to choose what we want to choose, but mine the minds of our heart and mind, because inside are precious gems designed by creation for inspiration to do what needs to be done right. See, I'm a poet and I kind of know it.
Oh my God. Did you write that?
Yeah.
I have to just say that was really beautiful. So thank you. So there is a poem that I remember that I wrote, and I got to say it real quick too, because it's aligned with this. God, I hope I can remember. A sea of open grace and depth, beyond the shadows tortured death, inside purified water singing to light the fire of sacred dreaming. And then it goes on.
God.
And then it goes on and on and on and on. It's a really long poem. I think I had the whole thing memorized.
We could do more of this. This is amazing. This is the flow, the creative flow, and others too. Like, people type out your quotes that you love. Like, we're all here to interact and say, oh wow, that's right, you have masteries too. We all have masteries, and they're all a little bit different. And if we as individuals choose to make becoming conscious of whatever those masteries might be within us, then we inspire others to do that. Then everybody's bringing a lot to the table in the way of potential and transformation and what kind of world we could create together.
Totally. Dancing and celebrating around the great cosmic campfire, looking back, wondering what in the F was that, but it's crazy. But how it's bonding us is way more important than focusing on how it might separate us, because that's a choice. That doesn't need to happen. And it's so important that you and I are holding space to, build community. We have another channel. We're going to post it also on this other channel, elevating community. And I know you're doing that in Maine. I'm working on doing that here in Montana. We got a roundtable tonight. We have an online event. Your support is awesome.
Right, in an hour.
I think like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But we'll get off. But I mean, it's incredible, and everybody can do this where you're living. When you feel that something's not happening where you're living, or you're feeling frustrated or alone, that might mean that you're the leader that needs to stand up and instigate it and start to make it happen. We can't just sit around waiting for somebody else to do anything. If we feel the calling, if we feel the longing, let's stand up and support one another. And this is what, Seth is joining me on Cosmic Gaia a lot. That's just another subscription thing. And we'll develop that more and share that with you guys at a later time. But we're going to be doing a lot more of these. I'm so uplifted. It's incredible to talk to you. And I know, I think you said your final thought, and thanks for, it's cool to share poems, but
Any
final thoughts or any more to your poem before we go?
Yeah, thank you. And I again, it's shifting the attitude, right? Attitude equals altitude. I don't know who said that, but that's all it is. You just keep changing your attitude and look at the pain and suffering and everything as an opportunity for growth. The more you do that, the quicker you're going to move out of your addiction to stress, and then you're going to start to embody your potential. That's it. That's all it is. And you know.
So beautiful, Seth. Always so well said. And I've just enjoyed it so much. A few distractions are coming in because I know we got to shift gears here, but we'll
do these a lot. We'll do it all the time.
And I caught that, and that was really awesome. And I'll see you in just a little bit, and hope you guys will join us for a roundtable with Neil Gar and Augie Nost. We have an event activating all the good stuff. I'm like,
words. That's right. Well, these words, pretty soon we're not going to be using words anymore.
Oh yeah, but Elena Dannon's going to be there, Dr. Charnel, and Seth and myself, and it's going to be a great conference, November 1st and 2nd, and I'll share the details. And we're gonna do that in like 15-20 minutes. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. It was really, awesome. And it's so important, especially if people are really hitting, I could keep going on, but if you're really struggling on a day-to-day basis, push yourself a little bit to get out of the rut. Even if you feel like you're not up for talking to friends or being on camera.
Watch this talk that we just did. Watch it over and over. Like, keep reminding yourself of why it's worth giving yourself attention and loving yourself. Like, this is what I did. This is what you do. Like, you don't just sit around and wait for something to happen. Like, we meet it halfway, So.
Yes, because I find it's sometimes easy to talk myself out of it, or I'm not up for it, but I'm not here to do it perfectly or to be polished or to expect myself to be. It goes so much deeper, and so.
All right.
I give much gratitude and thanks to everybody. We'll see you again in just a little bit.